Welcome to the Resolute Man podcast. We have Vince Delmonte here today. Hey, Vince.
Isaac, thanks for having me, man. This is super, super awesome.
Well, hey, you're the third guest ever, so it's a perfect fit. I've been so curious to ask you a couple interesting questions, but really, as you know, we're going to do more of a discussion style today. We have some topics we agreed on, but I'm so glad to have you here. You're in the fitness world, entrepreneur, and really what you do is help entrepreneurs build their fitness businesses, former people running gyms or other people as well. So it's just really exciting to have you on. You're the first fitness person on the show.
Oh, that's so cool, man. Well, as you know, I was a huge follower specifically during all your uploads during the the pandemic and your thoughts and how you're leading and just kind of saying a very counterintuitive message at the time. I really admire your courage to speak up in that. We made an exit. We're still in the process, but it was. I remember tuning in, and I really respect your work. You and your wife have done like a massive, massive amount of help in people's lives. So thank you for bringing me on.
Oh, I'm so glad. And I really, what's cool is you were listening to the Courageous Parenting podcast. And the reason I think that's so cool is because, I'd say 90% are probably females that are listening to that podcast show. But it's that 10% of men are really incredible dudes. They are really awesome dudes. And I wish more men listen to the Courageous Parenting podcast because that's why I'm there every single week with my wife. It's for the men. It's to really understand how to navigate this marriage and parenting thing. So, hey, brother, I appreciate you being part of that show and encouraging us on too. So that's great. I saw what's interesting, people should know. I saw some info about what you're doing, and you've helped over 36 clients become millionaire fitness coaches.
Yeah, in the last 6 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's just an incredible thing. And while, obviously being biblical men, it's not all about money, but money is a resource, a tool that enables us to be generous, enables us to take care of our families and provide. And so it's the love of money that's the issue that people sometimes have. But if we look at more of a resource, a source of freedom and provision and generosity, then it's just a beautiful thing. So I really thought that was a unique and interesting thing about what you're doing, which is so cool. But hey, before we truly jump into our topics, I just want to thank everybody for listening in. If you're wherever you're listening, would you give us a review? The podcast is new, the Resolute Man podcast, and I would love for more men to get access to this. And so give it a 5-star review, do a written review. I always read them, and it really helps the algorithms to get the show out there and so forth. All resources are at resoluteman.com. And don't forget that Resolute Manifesto that's there now. People are loving that, and I really poured my heart into it, and it's succinct. So no extra words. It's just what it needs to be, and it'll help you. So anyways, Vince, let's dive in. I was super curious. I've seen you, and I think we had a previous conversation about testosterone. Sure. And, I recently got tested because I had some issue going on with me a while back. And I'm happy to share with everybody, I'm in the normal, but I'm in the bottom end of normal. And I have some plans of how to boost that in a natural way and so forth. But I know that a lot of people, there's a lot of advancing technologies in medicine these days and things you can do to put in your body, including testosterone.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious about your journey on that. I thought that'd be an interesting conversation, as this is something I think all men are dealing with.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you intended to kind of, start with the millionaire fitness coach lead and the testosterone, but there is a connection there. Yeah. Because, starting my online fitness business was really a pursuit to see what was possible. First of all, there was just kind of like a pure innocence of hey, can I make money online? There was never an intent to be I didn't even know what a millionaire was. That term was never tossed around in my house. It was just, we worked to provide for the family, keep the lights on, but there was never any big ambitions being discussed. So for me, starting my online fitness business was, could I make a couple extra bucks to pay my bills? I wanted to make an extra 2 to 3K per month. I never intended for this to be something big, but as I went into this world, what happened was, the online world is really fascinating, and I started to just love it. I love the people I was meeting. You start getting some recognition. I had a YouTube channel, and you kind of become like a mini celebrity and people look at you differently. And then I started making, quite a bit of money, and all of a sudden you start to realize it's giving you a new identity. So like the storyline, like my journey, I think there's always been, a quest to like find my identity and like who am I? And although I, grew up Christian as well, my father was a pastor for 19 years, I never truly knew that God loved me for who I am and not for who I could be and not for who I should be. And I think a big underlying theme in my life has been like trying to find my identity and figuring out like who am I? And I found like my identity in being a successful businessman. So a successful businessman in terms of like becoming a millionaire myself with my passion for fitness. And I think, the whole journey like about the testosterone was, as you go into this world, like your network expands. You start hanging out with guys who are making a lot more money, and it's not even about the money anymore, because I'm actually a really simple guy at the core, but it was like what that money was representing. Look at me, I'm moving up the ladder, I'm more important. It became about how big the rooms were when we were doing events and how big your team was. And I think the testosterone was just a piece that fell into the, ongoing story of trying to fit in. And when I talk about this testosterone, like it's really not from like a medical standpoint. Like I can kind of share some of that, but like my decision to go on it and to come off of it, it wasn't like I was feeling horrible and I was like really suffering, and my life, I had no energy, and I was a drain. Like it was more like back to the original, what's possible. And if I have this little extra help, maybe this is going to help me get more attention on my business. And it was like deep down, I knew that the reason I was doing it was from a deep rooted insecurity of like wanting to look a certain way, right? A lot of the guys I was hanging out with are just bigger, they're more muscular, they had a certain look. And I'm like, this could give me a bit of an edge. And it was kind of like a what's a good term? But it was a kind of a hack that was acceptable, because you're not taking your levels to super physiological where you're going to test negative on a drug test. And I wasn't the whole thing every dude says, who was I hurting? Well, I was hurting myself, because deep down I was, profiting from like being bigger and being leaner. And no one ever like, well, it's a big deal. Your levels are low. You want to bring them up a bit. But for me, deep down, I had to like wrestle with that. And, I don't tell people like you should do it or you shouldn't do it. It's a it's a bioidentical hormone. And I just had to like start to look at the ramifications of testosterone in my life. And it did make you a little more aggressive. It does increase like some frantic energy. You can eat more food and get away with it. You do look better. You do look fuller. You can recover faster. There are tremendous benefits. But then I was like, I don't want to stick a needle in my butt for the rest of my life. And then, the expense wasn't...
Is that the only way to do it? Sorry to interrupt, but I'm just super curious. Is that the
No,
only
there's
way?
other ways. You can do creams.
Okay.
You can do nasal stuff. You can put it in your
Okay.
thigh. Like there are like less invasive ways.
Okay.
But, the way I was doing it was like, there's, you take the HCG on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then you're taking 100 milligrams, on Thursday. And then when you're traveling with needles. And I was just like, what the heck did I sign up for? Like, this isn't like who I am. And, Isaac, I think I shared with you a bit about my personal situation, but, this, about 15 months ago, my world hit rock bottom, and I separated, and it wasn't what I wanted, but it's what happened. And in this last 15 months, I was married for 14 years. I've got 3 young kids, 10, 8, and 6, and it's been like the hardest 15 months of my life. And I had to like look inwards and just look at everything in my life that led to this like pursuit of more. And if I summed up like the separation from I'll speak on my behalf only, is that, I was disconnected from my spouse, from my kids. It wasn't malicious, but like I was your typical, pretty driven A-type, go. And my spouse felt like her needs were not being met. And I had to look at like how I contributed Like I had to really look at the ugly parts inside me and why was I unable to like, and that's another podcast for another day, but I looked at even the things that kept driving me, and I looked at, excessive caffeine use, I looked at alcohol use, I looked at testosterone, and I chose to pursue a chemical-free life back in June of this year. So it's been over half a year since I've come off of chemicals. The only chemical that it's been a very challenge for me to come off is sugars. But that is a chemical as well. And I just wanted to look at all the things that I was supplementing my life with that created this disconnection from my head and my heart, and just created a pace of life that led to some severe consequences. And I don't know how my story is going to wrap up. We're not divorced, we're separated, but like there's been severe consequences. And I'm not blaming testosterone for my separation, but like it was a piece of trying to figure out who the heck is Vince and why wasn't enough. And
well, I have so many questions. This is so interesting, Vince, because what is the realization now that's been all these months that you've been chemical free? What is the change that you're witnessing? I think that would be super interesting.
That's an amazing question. I realized that I wasn't living authentically, and I was disconnected from like who Vince Delmonte really is. And Vince isn't a drug guy. I'm Italian. Like my dad doesn't. He doesn't do it. Like, and again, I just realized. Again, when I share all this is my story, right? So I'm really sensitive. Like everyone's got to sort this thing out on their own. My levels were actually low. Like I had good reason to go on them, and they did benefit and help. But I think the big thing for me was a self-discovery and awakening of like I'm not truly living authentically. And I say when you're not living authentically, you're not living raw. And what's raw spelt backwards? War. I was at war. I was at war with myself. And I just realized that, starting to try and fit in, just like back in high school, this all started after therapy. I looked at it all. It all started when I wanted to hang out with the cool Italian guys and they started drinking. And I'm like, I don't drink beer. It doesn't even taste good. But I wanted to be a part of the cool kids club. And I'm like, I'm a grown adult. I'm 44 years old and I'm still being driven by behaviors from insecurities that started in my teens. And that's how trauma begin before we're logical. So I think the biggest discovery was that it wasn't worth the gains that I made, success, fame, finances, in exchange for losing me being who I truly am and disconnecting from myself.
It sounds a lot like, I often say, don't let your ambition sacrifice your most important missions. And it sounds a little bit like that. It sounds like you're going down a direction where that ambition was so strong that some people got left in the dust a little bit. And I think this is super good for men to hear because it's good. Ambition's good. It's good to be driven. It's good to pursue things that are good. Success is okay, right? If our mentality's right, if our priorities are right. But as soon as we start just wanting more and more and more, and we start sacrificing the jurisdictions that are most important that God gave us, our marriage and our family, then that's a big wake-up call. And I think one of the lies, Vince, that happens, and I know I've believed this lie before, is that, okay, this is my time to hustle, and once the kids are this age, then I'll have more freedom because I hustled and I made things happen. And I'm doing it for the family and all of these kinds of things, which some of that can be true, but really our habits become ingrained. And when that arrival date comes, then you have this insatiable desire for even more. And what happens to men so often is that just perpetuates into the future. And then they wake up one day and they've lost what's most important.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. Yeah, and I think men just don't appreciate that, loved ones can stand up and walk out, even if you did vows, even if you, did it in front of God. Some people just get to a point where enough is enough. And I think it is interesting because men just don't stop. And I think I call it the furthest 18 inches a man will ever travel, which is from his head to his heart. And to live from a place where they are in tune with their minds, with their hearts, with their emotions, and they create space in their life to actually process. So like with the testosterone thing, I was working out in the gym. I see all these big guys. I'm like, why is everyone so jacked in here? They're like, oh, you got to go see Dr. B. I'm like, who's Dr. B? He's like, oh, he's just the office is right back there, man. You get him to check your levels. And I'm like, me, Dr. B. He's a normal guy. He's super educated. He's in great shape. He's like, yeah, come on into the office. I'm like, oh yeah, Vinny, your levels are pretty low. You're gonna put you on a couple things here and here. We'll get them right back to normal. You'll be optimized. You'll feel great. You're like, cool, let's do it. Like, I didn't say like, let me pray about this, or let me think about this, or like, let me. And that's what I mean by like being disconnected. Like there's no space in your life for processing and for like waiting and for listening, maybe listening to your intuition, listening to God, and just like maybe talking to some other men. Like, it was just like, yeah, I'm in. Yeah, how do I sign up? Okay, next thing you know, I got a cupboard full of needles and I got like things in the fridge, and I'm like, all right, I guess I'm doing this. So there's just consequences to trying to sustain a pace that I don't think we were ever meant to sustain. But unfortunately, because of the world we live in, we see everybody going, seems like everyone's going faster, faster. I got to keep up because, again, and I think a lot of men's identities are rooted in other men's insecurities as well. So that's a big piece to sort out.
Well, what's interesting is the other question I had for you regarding, I mean, I love letting the spirit lead because you never know what we're going to talk about. But, you said your dad was a pastor, you were raised Christian in a Christian home and these kinds of things. And I think this is a big warning too, is obviously you didn't have your identity firmly in Christ. You were insecure in some ways and searching for your identity. And obviously we don't have time maybe to share the whole story, but what's your message? Like, even though you're raised in a Christian home, a lot of people listening are raising children and they are a Christian home. And so how, seeing the ramifications of not having really knowing who you are and then deviating away further from who you are and trying to find your identity in worldly things, what's your message from that lesson learned?
Man, I mean, I really discovered God's love for me when I hit that rock bottom and I cried out. And it was a supernatural moment. The story is a bit gory, but just to leave the details out, like when I really realized like this was real, and like she was checked out. I mean, I was like, I'm used to being able to get everything I want. I'm a bulldozer. Like it's typically like I get what I want. I'm not used to being rejected. I'm not used to hearing no. And I was when I realized like I had nothing like to turn to fix this, and that's when I called out to God. And I was like on my hands and knees one night, like crying in the middle of the night. And I actually felt a physical presence, a supernatural presence come around me and arms just hold me. And from that day, I've probably cried every day for the last 15 months. Like my heart got cracked open and I've been doing my best to keep it open. And I just realized like I hadn't been living according to God's agenda. It was Vince's agenda. I realized like when I prayed, I was praying to God for Vince's agenda. And I wasn't like, hey, Lord, your agenda, your will. It was really, hey, Lord, can you help me with this? Lord, can you, thank you for blessing me in this. And it wasn't like a true relationship where I was submitting and surrendering in a way that like, hey, Lord, you need a guide now. I clearly don't know what I'm doing. And we've all heard this. Like every Christian man has heard this, but that was the day it became real. I think sadly for me, I needed that sledgehammer to wake up. And man, I just would encourage men to like hope it doesn't have to get that painful to wake up. But man, I really would just encourage men to like realize like regrets, like you can have a regret and turn it into research and like learn from it, but like you just really got to figure out what's most important. And I think at the end of the day, the wisest men alive are people who've figured out how to put relationships first. I think, if you ask a room full of people and say, raise your hand, who's the wisest person you know? Is it the person who makes the most money? 10 out of 100 people's hands will go up. You ask, who's the wisest person you know? And is it the smartest person you know? Maybe 15 people's hands will go up. If you ask the room, who's the wisest person you know? Is it someone who's got rich relationships? I think you see like more than half the room's hand go up. And I just think relationships at the end of the day is what's most important.
Mhm.
And if you're sacrificing relationships in the pursuit of more, like you've lost your way.
Yeah. The Bible talks about it as pride, and there's a difference between obviously being proud of your kids. That's a good being proud of your kids for doing something good, but pride is something different. And Scripture talks about pride before the fall, right? And I think men more than women struggle with pride, and we have to deal with that. And all of us, I mean, if someone thinks they don't have pride, that's probably the most prideful statement they could probably say. I mean, I think we all struggle with this. I think it's something that we need to be really honest about and to go, where is pride getting in the way of my relationships, to your point? Where is it getting in the way of God's best path for my influence, my
Yeah.
best path for my words and activities and how I spend my time and how I spend my resources? And I think that sometimes that really gets in the way, and it probably is a lack of an identity firmly being planted in Christ, and somebody that's maybe not reading. I can't imagine if I wasn't reading the Word of God, how much more prideful I would be. And I say more because I do get prideful sometimes, right? So it's it's like I need to be tempered with God's Spirit. I need to be tempered with His Word.
Yeah.
And gentlemen, if you're not reading the Word, it's going to be so hard to navigate, and that pride can get out of control sometimes. And when you're in that state of being prideful, you can't even see yourself. You
Yeah.
think, oh, look, everything's great, everything's greater than it's ever been. But for other people around you, you aren't making the season the greatest for them, and
Yeah.
that's a tough thing.
Yeah. No, it's huge. No, I can totally resonate with that. Um, I think there's, for Christian men, I think I saw it like after this all happened, you're forced to go back and like unpack, decode. And I realized that I even was, taking God for granted. And I think a lot of men can just like, God still loves me. But like at the same time, like your pride is like a process of sacrificing God's best. And,
Mm.
you're holding on to like my plans are better than your plans. And I think, the big thing that I really discovered was like the character of God in this. And that like he revealed to me like how like open his arms are still, and he kept knocking, like he was willing to let me go through this type of pain, and like he knocked through my no. I kept
Mhm.
saying, not like I don't think I verbally said no, but I think inside each person, like every man knows like where there might be a rebellious spirit or a rebellious demon that they've partnered with, and it's like there's one area of their life that they haven't. And I can't sit here and say like God's got like there's certain areas in my life I'm like I've let go of so much, but I can see him like you so you're really going to take me through this much pain in order to have my whole heart, to capture my heart. And I think I just really truly discovered like God's heart for like wanting to partner with us, and for us to be fully like surrendered. And in that process, that's where I've like experienced healing. And I've seen like he's forgiven me, so I need to forgive myself. Like he's loved me, I need to start loving myself. And I think that his model for like how he's loved me has been like the model that I'm trying to now like if he can do that for me, why can't I do that for myself? So being less hardcore on myself for like trying to get to these goals, less like
Mhm.
more patient, having more maybe realistic timelines, not getting so discouraged, and and not banking like my whole day around like if we make a certain amount of money, and if we don't, then everybody's gonna have to feel my mood today. And
Mm.
and I just realized like I had the wrong target. So I think that's my message for men today. I'll sum it up like this: to redefine success,
Yeah.
really, you got to redefine success. Like you got to, and for whatever walk of life you're on right now, like you've got to be able to put your head on a pillow at night and know like, was today a win? And the win is like what's important now, and did you build your success statement around what's important now? And there are seasons where like you're going to spend more time with the kids, and those
Mhm.
like days are going to fly by. And then there might be seasons where like the kids are older and you do get to put the hammer down and push harder in business. And I think it's like knowing, but though, what season am I in right now? And like, when I guess from what I've been told, I thought I was supportive, but I guess I wasn't. I didn't do a great job, and I thought we were on the same page, and she felt lonely when the kids were little, and I'm like, but I was working, and like, and I guess maybe I just, well, that's your job, and like, I think that we just have to appreciate, like, hey, I'm in a season right now that needs a reshifting in priorities.
Yeah.
And just knowing, like, hey, other guys aren't doing this right now, but like, I'm going to do this right now because I don't want to look back and realize I neglected, and now because there's consequences of that.
And are you finding that your business is still going fine and things are acceptable? Give a sense for your life.
Oh, no, dude, this was the roughest year. This was the roughest in 17 years. Like, I made a few $1,000,000 less this past 15 months. I probably worked 25% of what I normally do because I was depressed. I was angry. I was confused. I was not motivated. I didn't even feel like qualified or worthy to come out on social media and tell, my whole brand was built around helping men make money and not sacrifice their family. And here I'm the guy, like, I was putting out a message. I was preaching a message that wasn't being fully practiced privately. Now, a lot of people who know me were like saying, Vince, you're way too hard on yourself. And like, you actually were an incredible dad. You're like one of the best men that we know. But that's called justification. It's called defending your bad with the good. And it's easy to do that. But no, this past year has been super hard. And it's because I was like, this was like teaching people how to make money was not like exciting. I'm like, this pursuit led me to the darkest place of my life. So I've had to like rebrand as well. And like, you can't, when you're going through this, it's not like, hey guys, we're switching scripts right now. Like, I actually had to go through a very painful process before I even like started to realize that maybe bigger isn't better. Maybe better is better. And I started sharing, like, let's build a better business, not necessarily a bigger business. You got to earn bigger. And, it's probably been the greatest lesson of my life. Like, because I can now, I know what it feels like to be depressed. I can relate to more people. I know what it feels like to be stressed and to have like a setback, because I didn't have those, like, I didn't feel those things before. So I believe God put these things in, allowed these things, or however you frame it, so that I can reach more people because of this new type of pain. So, but yeah, no, it's a rebrand, because I used to sell just money. Like, let's get to this financial milestone, but now my standards are like, hey, let's do it in a different way though. And I actually mean it. Like, so it's definitely been like one of the hardest years of my life.
Well, hey, I have a scripture that the Spirit, I feel like, just prompted me to share with everybody regarding this. It's in John 15, right in the beginning. Such a great whole section here. But it says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. So, believers, we're going to be pruned. He loves us so much that he wants to refine us. He wants us to be in a better position to glorify him with our lives. And so he's going to prune us. And I think that one of the lessons, because I've had some of these things happen, and one of the, not exactly the same, but financial things and business failures and things like that happen in my life, with great successes too. And one of the things I've come to the grips with is, wow, part of fearing God, and when I say fear, it's not that dread fear. It's a different kind of fear that the Bible talks about when it's talking about fearing God. It's a respect for his authority in our lives, respect for how awesome he is and how much he loves us and that he's our creator. That's the kind of fear. But I think also it's like, well, he wants us to be refined, and he's going to prune us. And so if we're making big errors, if we're, walking in pride and sacrificing our family and these kinds of things, well, he loves us so much that he's going to prune us. He's going to prune us back. And when you prune something, it's painful. Like, do you think a plant loves being cut, right? And part of it being cut off? Well, that's what I hear happening to you, Vince. And so I'm really excited about what God has in store for you. And I think this story is going to be super impactful for people to hear. So I really appreciate it. But what's your take on that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, neat thing is that there's been so many breakthroughs from like the breakdown, right? I was forced to learn how to trust my team more and to give clear, expectations. And I've been forced to learn how to communicate better and to, learn how to run a business with the team. And we had to rely more on ads and, shift some of our strategy. So all these things that, when you're like everything's hunky dory, you can create content all day long. I can show up and I can motivate and I can, pump everyone. But
Yeah.
like when you feel like I'm a fraud or I'm a complete failure or I just screwed up or you're just like sad and confused and angry and lonely, like no one wants to listen to that guy. So
Yeah.
there's weeks that I didn't post a podcast. Like, I just wasn't able to execute. So I realized like my business was also vulnerable because the business was so reliant on my state. And I had to realize like, okay, I got exposed to a lot of vulnerability. So yeah, the word refinement, yeah, incredible. And I've had to like reassess like now, we have this beautiful home in Toronto and, I'm in it's a great home, but I realized like this is, a smaller townhouse, much smaller townhouse. I'm like, I'm actually fine in here. And I'm like, why did I need so much house? And I know why, there was reasons for it and all that, but I also realized like, what did I like do? Like I've created all of this excess that created all this extra pressure to constantly perform. And I'm like, who am I performing for? So I think the refinement has been like another piece of refinement has been learning how to be content with less. And that's like, God forbid you use the term content these days because it sounds like settling. It sounds like laziness. It sounds like you're not achieving your full potential. But what I will counter is that counter comes from guys who are just having one-dimensional success. And why can't success be quantified also in like that I can actually go half a week without working and I'm not like freaking out. Like somebody who's like, oh, I could never do that. Well, that's something you should maybe look into, explore. Why not? Why is boredom so hard for you? Like, well, I'm not wired that way. Like, okay, well, so why are you so hardwired that way? Is it coming from a dysfunction? Very likely from a trauma from childhood that you haven't even looked at. Well, that's like, so your success is built on a survival strategy, which isn't a sustainable fuel source. So this refinement has forced me to look at like, do I really need, all this excess? And I mean, obviously the answer is no, but like I got affirmation and verification of that through this process.
Yeah. And this whole thing just reminds me of like, practical tip for men is what I call positive disruption. It's if we don't purposely create a disruption and recalibrate along the journey, then there's going to be a big disruption way down the road. And one of the things, and I think you'll agree with this, is one of the things that's so important to be able to even see that you need a positive disruption. You need to make some kind of recalibration or change in something that's happening is having a council of men around you and having really strong brothers in Christ that aren't just going to share their experiences, although those can be helpful sometimes, but they're going to share wisdom from the Word of God. They have the Holy Spirit in them, and they are paying attention to your life, and they're going to see things, and you've given them permission to actually speak into your life if you see you veering off of a good track. And I think that if we don't have a counsel left to our own minds and our own strength, we can go pretty far in this world. It's a pretty, there's a lot of resources, there's a lot of opportunity and so forth. So we can make it pretty far, but really we want to be surrendered to the Lord, which you've been talking about, and also be iron sharpens iron with other brothers in our lives, and to allow our spouse, to allow our wife to also speak into our life and to look at her as the most important partner and teammate to go along with. And you're not necessarily doing the same vocation together always, right? A lot of times that's not the case. But if she doesn't feel like a team in what you're doing, if you're not praying together about the things coming up, if you're not running things by your bride and seeking her wisdom too, she might feel like she's being left behind in a way. And so these are just some tips that came to mind. What are your thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. Yeah, I always I love the idea of a couple being a team, right? Together each achieves more. And, I love the idea of collaborating and building something together. And I think, there's certain elements, like for me, it was really important to like build something big together, but that wasn't really like on her radar. And I don't think I appreciated that. So, relationships are like, someone needs to bend. And I think that's what's really hard, because we live in a world where like, well, if you don't support my dreams, then like, you're not I get it. I understand that, but like, maybe you're not ready to be in a relationship yet, because that's kind of like the point, to be willing to like sacrifice, and to be considerate of the other person's situation. Well, they should, grow up then, or like, well, that's not where they're at yet. So there is, and ultimately those are great chances to create connection and compassion for each other. And maybe the person isn't ready, but maybe they will be. Maybe they just want to see if they go along in this journey with you to what you want to do, like, will they still be safe and secure? Maybe they don't feel safe and secure right now, which is why they're not getting on board with you. So, I mean, I just know like the path to having like a really connected relationship, from like seeing like what we failed to do, was vulnerability, and having like real transparent openness and trust, and like where you don't sweep things under the rug. And that was kind of like, I think a lot of men get caught up in a pace of life where it's like, we'll deal with this later. We'll deal with this later. This is an issue. Like, we'll yell at each other now. We won't talk about it for a couple of days, and then we'll worry about it later when the kids are older. And the next thing you know, that smallest thing becomes the biggest thing. So there needs to be space for like touching in. So I fully agree with all that. And like, we didn't have like weekly meetings, and we didn't have we had date nights. Like, there was a lot of things we did do really well, but to really be in tune with your partner's heart, like that takes work, and it's really uncomfortable, because they might share stuff with you that's an interruption to your day and your goals, and you're like, so it just gets, we'll worry about this later.
That was such good wisdom. That was so good. I want to shift gears for a second and talk about this mastermind thing. I know you're big into it. In fact, you've even been encouraging me to do a mastermind. So I'm like, well, that's interesting. And you're like, yeah, Isaac, you should, get, couples together and, meet, and then do some group stuff online and all these things. But I know you're deep into this. You help people build these masterminds. You do masterminds for entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So give me a sense for this. It's super interesting.
Well, yeah. So I got introduced to the concept of a mastermind in 2010. I was invited out to meet these 10 guys. So first of all, like, I am a product of masterminds. Like, I love them. I think they're like, everybody's got one now, and there's like, it's kind of like, I think there's a proper way to do them, and I think they're kind of getting a bad name. But like, I'm just going back to when I first heard about the concept. I got invited down to West Palm, Florida. It was 2010 by a guy named Ryan Lee. And Ryan was like the OG of online fitness. He was like the first guy who was like teaching people how to sell stuff online. And it was so cool. And I got invited into this small, tiny room, and there was just 10 guys. And it was like a big boardroom table, and no one knew each other. We all knew of each other, and there were like some big names in the room, and I was like the little dog. And I was just like a group of guys coming together for 2 days, sharing what was working in their business, what wasn't working, and best plays. And it was just kind of like this table of shared information and ideas and collaboration. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I'm like, this is so cool that like in 2 days I could download it like every guy's brain into a notepad, and I went back and executed everything that they learned. And it was like you're buying like massive amount of like, there's 4 things you're buying when you join a mastermind. This is kind of how I pitch it, but it's 1,000,000% true. You're buying knowledge. So you're buying knowledge. I'm buying your knowledge to learn about all the stuff you've learned. I'm buying speed. So I'm learning like what's working right now. I'm buying relationships. So I'm getting connected. I'm getting access, building friendships with guys who are going to be around if I need to call them up. And then I'm getting accountability. So like at the end of this, everyone's like, hey, do you want to do this again? I'm like, yeah. So you want to be the guy that goes to the next mastermind event and not have done what you said you were going to do. And like I'm a product of those 4 things. So I think the big thing is like the community, the relationships you develop with the people in the rooms, and the ideas that you get. I think one of the best things masterminds do is they kind of show you what you don't know. And a lot of masterminds have now kind of been like butchered down to like big groups, and people are going there for like really specific tactics and like support. Some of these groups are so big now you don't get that, which is tough. But what they definitely do deliver is like you'll be exposed to all this stuff you're not doing and be like, wow, there's a lot of opportunity here, and it really expands your thinking.
Yeah, it's what you don't know that you don't know that hurts you most in business. So it's those blind spots that are holding you back, and you may think like you're doing everything you can, I'm doing my best, and these kinds of things. Well, you're really only doing your best based on your knowledge and your implementation of today. But what you don't know that you need to know is what's hurting you. And so that's what I hear you saying about a mastermind is you're discovering those things that you didn't even realize you needed to know from people doing similar things that you're trying to do, which I think is powerful. How big is too big?
I think, oh man, I mean, we got up to over 300 members, and I think that was pretty big. Now, the way the program really depends on how it's structured. So like what happened was with my program, it started off as just events. So like masterminds used to be just like 3 events per year. So you join a mastermind. Think of the first mastermind I joined, it was Craig Ballantyne's 10K, and there was 3 2-day events, nothing else. There's no I didn't call Craig in between. There was no Facebook group. There's no Kajabi portal. I just showed up at those 3 2-day masterminds. And then I joined Bedros Keuilian's mastermind like a year later, and it was the same thing, 3 2-day events. I didn't get to call Bedros in between the events. I just showed up at the events, downloaded everything that was taught, and that was it. And those room sizes were anywhere from like 10 to 20. And that's like, I think that's like the real mastermind, like 10 to 20 people in a room. But now like people say I have a mastermind, but there's 300, 400, 100 people in the group, but there's also other deliverables. So the mastermind is included. It's more so a coaching program with masterminds included. So then that's how we're structured. So we have coaching calls, we have one-on-one calls, we have a portal, we have a Facebook group, and we have 3 2-day events. So the 2-day events, they all serve a different purpose. So I have some friends who have their events very structured, like very workshop style, like you're coming to learn a specific skill and you're doing work in the room. Other masterminds are more like lots of guest speakers and they're all speaking on different topics. They're all valuable. I think it just kind of comes down to like, what are you looking for? What is your business need right now? Some masterminds you just go to, like I joined one group called the 100 Million Mastermind, and it was $100,000 for the year. And it was some of the top internet marketers, leaders, coaches in the space. And you just join that one for connections, like just to meet people, just to like say, hey, we're friends now. Do you want to podcast together? It's like just podcasting with one guy, or, hey, we're friends now. I'd love to have you come speak at my event. Just the connections was worth the investment. So it all comes down to like, what are you looking for? And there's like no shortage of groups to look at.
Super intriguing, super interesting. Hey, this has been great. I think this whole episode's been kind of about the question in a sense that I've been asking people, but I want to ask you and see what you say is, tell us a time where you rejected passivity, meaning that most men, in fact, I would say all men, because of what happened in the Garden of Eden, have some passivity in them, and it takes effort to fight that, to resist it in the moment and do what's uncomfortable and say something, do something, stand up for something, love somebody well, whatever it is, and it makes a big difference. So tell us a time where you rejected passivity and it was a meaningful difference in your life.
I think the first time was during the pandemic, and I was just one of the early adopters speaking out against a lot of the craziness going on in Ontario. We nicknamed it Ontario. And, I was downtown before there was the big parades against, all the restrictions and extended lockdowns and stuff. And that just really inspired me to like, hey, don't be afraid to share what you believe. And and that had, a lot of fallout, but it also, like, my coaching program blew up. I
Mm.
had so many people say, like, I'm so happy that you're just speaking up. So that was one instance. And then, I think more recently, just with my separation, like, a lot of people just told me to, like, hey, this, walk, like, just move on. And, you don't deserve this and you tried. And I think I could still take that stance, and I've left my heart open. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think just being open to being hurt has probably I feel like one of the greatest acts of courage that I've had. And, just trusting God that, like, hey, she fought, I would say, during the marriage, like she tried, in her version, she tried. And now, I'm trying to preserve, like, what we have. And now she's on her journey to figure out if she wants to try again. And I think just not quitting, has been huge. And, we built this beautiful home in Franklin, Tennessee, and I felt God ordained that and guided us there for our kids. We found an incredible classical Christian school, and I've held on to this vision. I, in fact, heard God say, hang on to the house.
Mm.
And I said, why? And he said, you'll see.
Mm.
Like, I heard him say that. And, I'm like, every day I'm like, should I sell this house? Because it's a massive financial burden. It's a major stressor. And, um, I don't know, maybe as of right now, I'm doing what I feel like I've been told. I'm pretty sure, this is what I have to do. So I think there's been a lot of opportunities just to kind of like bow out and, like,
Mm.
but I mean, I'm being challenged definitely to lead and, like, to really show up for my kids now. Like, I got them 4 days a week now. So, like, I
Mm.
got to show up for those kids. Like,
Yeah.
I'm making their lunches now. I'm driving them to school. I'm doing the laundry. I'm like, I have to show up. And I got also, like, we go skiing and they got their activities and I got to run my bid. So, um, I think I could have really checked out the last 15 months and just felt sorry for myself. And I did do that. But I realized, like, you know, this is an opportunity to grow more than you've ever grown. So, um,
Well, you're being refined, and I would like to invite everybody listening to pray for Vince and his marriage and his family. What this has been so good, so much vulnerability. Transparency breeds transparency. So when men like you share the raw truth of what's real, and it encourages other men to be that. And I think that's part of masculinity is being raw, being real, being transparent, letting our guard down so that we can have real relationship with other brothers in Christ. So anyways, I think you've stirred that today and I appreciate that. And I'm going to be praying for you and I hope more people pray. Let's all pray for each other. That's so
yeah,
important. Brothers praying for each other. So
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Well,
100%.
hey, where can people go to find out more about what you're doing? That's most important on the business side right now.
Yeah, at Vince Delmonte on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, and, the podcast. It's all at Vince Delmonte or the Vince Delmonte podcast. Just search my name on any four of those platforms and you'll find me.
All right, thanks so much for joining the podcast.